Steve Harris from White Maiden and British Lion. You listen to Andrew McCasebid from Scars and Guitars.
G'day everybody and welcome to the show. I've got a conversation with Matt Barlow, who was the fella out the front of Iced Earth for many years. These days he's got Ashes of Aries, which is the catalyst for the chat. Pneumatize is the name of the new album. It's an absolute cracker, it must be said. I've had a listen to it and it's definitely one of the albums of the year. If I can even frame things like that these days, it kind of feels redundant, but regardless, you know what it is that I'm saying. And throughout this conversation, what Matt is talking about, what he is saying, is his reflections on the album. Talking about lyrical themes. Where does it sit in his canon? His broad canon, well over a dozen albums at this point. Various collaborators, especially Byron Filson, who's managed to pull a tremendous sound from the musicians. We also discuss the environment around John Schaefer without actually talking about John Schaefer. So I noticed that Matt is being quoted a fair bit in the media. So we talk about the context of John's incarceration without actually discussing the detail around it. So tune in for that there. But overall, I've got to say, a conversation with Matt Barlow is just another opportunity to talk to a legend of hard rock and heavy metal. I've said it before and I'll say it again. These conversations are my absolute favorite. And here is why. Here he is, Matt Barlow.
Yeah, man.
G'day, mate. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Cool, mate. Yeah. Have you been on these, I call them Zoomers, mate. Have you had a few Zoomers before me or am I the first?
Yeah, I had one at 7:30 my time. I don't know, hour ago, I guess your time.
Yeah. How do we even here in Australia, if that's who you've been talking to, us Australian media types, do we differ at all in your experience compared to the rest of the world?
Yeah, not entirely. No. I was going, I was just talking to my wife. I was like, man, this is like the I think the fifth or sixth Australian interview I've done. I'm like, I wonder, is the record getting traction? Is the label pushing us in Australia or what? I mean, it's good. It's great. It's fantastic. But I don't remember doing so many before. So.
Yeah, it's all down to one bloke, mate, John Howarth, who's the best in the business for this sort of thing. He has broken a bunch of artists and solo work and really given a lane to people who would otherwise not have had it. So honestly, I can tell you that I've worked with him now for 8 years or so, and he's connected me with so many people. He just does such a great job with this stuff. Very
cool. Well, if I don't see him or speak with him, please pass on my regards.
Yeah, we'll do, mate. Yeah. Cool. All right, I'll kick things off. So I understand Pneumatize is the name of the album. It's hard to know how to frame an album in somebody's career such as yours because it's hard-won respect and also you've also got a lot of talent. So either people like what you're doing at this point or they're yet to discover it. But either way, the key point is it's excellent. You know what you're doing. And really, on that point, it's another killer album in your canon, and it might be one of your best because I am an old school Iced Earth fan. But in your view, how did you approach this album? Did you approach it any differently compared to anything else you worked on?
I don't think so, man. I mean, I think we got a lightning storm here. Yeah, we got some thunder. Anyway, wow, that was big. I knew it was going to be big. It was a big lightning bolt. No, man. I think that the main thing is just Freddie and I. We gel, and we've done this for now. This is our fourth record together, and we started doing this stuff a little bit differently, at least from what I grew up doing. As far as getting together with a band and jamming and working songs out and all that other stuff. Freddie and I started this completely, pretty much sharing digital files back and forth and writing that way. And, just sharing the ideas, getting on the phone, talking about stuff, sending notes back and forth via email and all that. So, I'm an old school guy. I'm, talk about this all the time, like all the digital recording that I do now, man. I started out, my first record I ever was on was we recorded with 2-inch tape, so it's a whole different world than the original, Burn Offering stuff. But as we progress and we figure out what our strengths and all that are and we try to lean into them as far as writing and then utilizing the tools that we have at hand. The other side of it is that we try to do a lot with a little. We don't. I really don't know what other bands' budgets are. I don't get into that whenever I'm talking to friends who record and things like that. I don't ask them. That's sort of like a personal question, like, hey man, how much money do you have in your account? But I can say, we don't have that big of a budget. We're on a small label. We're on a small indie label. They say, hey, can you do a record for this much? And we go, well, yeah, if you're going to give us that much, then we're going to do the record for that much. We're going to do the best that we can. So most of the stuff that we do, I track and produce all my vocals at my home studio. Freddie does all the guitars, bass, and all that stuff in his home studio. So pretty much we maintain the money for the mix and the mastering and all that good stuff, the real studio work. And I know that there are bands out there that are, gearheads and things, and they can record all their shit at home. But that's not us. We're a little bit older than that. We don't have that kind of technical knowledge. And I'm not a producer, although I find myself producing my own vocals here, but it's a little bit different. I couldn't imagine producing guitars and doing all that other stuff. But so, we like, again, we just sort of have discovered these things, and we've sort of worked with them and tried to do the better with each record, and with our budgets and things like that, and squeeze as much stuff out of the budget as we can to make a good sounding record. And a lot of it ends up sounding raw a little bit, because that's what we like anyway. I guess Freddie's a big death metal fan. I'm a big Bay Area thrash fan. So like our sensibilities tend to lean into a little bit more of a raw sound than a polished, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what we end up with, I guess. Some things, sound a little more polished than others, on purpose, but for the most part, we like a raw, kind of beefy, old school sound. So that's what we get.
More power to you, and that's why I'm connecting with it so much compared to just about everything else that's landing in my mailbox this year. In particular, we've hit peak digital recording technology methodology, if I can frame it that way. I don't understand what's going on with bands, but the stuff, I can hear it's well written, but it sounds dog shit. That's the only way I can frame it, because it's so bricked and so compressed. I've got kids. I walk around listening to stuff on this as I'm picking up everything from, just talk about dog shit, picking up dog shit, cat shit, dealing with the birds, the animals, everything else that we've got. And sometimes that's the only opportunity I get. I was listening to yours as I was doing all of that this morning, dealing with my kids' pets, and that was blasting through the speakers. And I thought, wow, what a great sounding album. So I've actually got a question for you about working with Byron Filson. So working with Byron sounds like he might be a very good producer and recorder, I should say, because I understand you worked with him on the mixing and the mastering is what.
Yep.
So did you choose to work with him, or did you just end up with him and it's just worked out fantastically?
Well, I think it's sort of just worked out fantastically that way, because he lives in Phoenix. That's where Freddie lives, and it just really worked out really well. He's connected with other friends of Freddie's that are professional musicians and stuff, and they recommended him, and he went over there and met with him, and he's really kind of one of his things is kind of doing reamps and stuff like that, and reamping and getting good guitar sounds from digital, basically digital recordings of guitars. Because, Freddie's, he's, like I said, he's recording his stuff at home. So a lot of that is, basically taking those signals and then reamping and getting good sounds and stuff like that, because it's hard to really, mic up an amp at your house, so you do end up having to do things like that, and that's obviously it would be great to be able to go into a studio and, you know, have the full deal and have the Marshall cabs mic'd up just right and all that other good stuff. But, you know, you can kind of redo that in those scenarios. And that's kind of what we're shooting for. We're trying to get as raw a sound as we possibly can from, you know, the budget that we're afforded and that we're allotted. So, yeah, I think Byron's done a really nice job in kind of bringing that sound, and I think he's got that old school background as well. So he kind of knows what we're looking for whenever we're looking for certain guitar sounds. You know, the drum sounds. He did do the drums in his studio for this record. Prior records have been done by Van in his own studio or at Morris Sound. And on the first record, Van's drums were done at Morris Sound, Morris Sound. The other two were done in Van's home studio. And so this past record was done. Kyle recorded them at Byron's place. So, yeah, it turned out really, really good, man. I really like the drum sound on this record as well. I think it's pretty straightforward and just sounds really, really full. So that's really cool.
I'm glad you mentioned Morris Sound and your work there. So a lot has been made of the legend of Morris Sound, but is it a bit like one of those or I'll just frame it in this way, is it a bit of a rustic old place that has more of a legend than it does, say, the ambience to record properly? Or what's your experience in Morris Sound?
No, actually, yeah, quite the opposite. And one of the reasons that, you know, it was purchased to do all of the Trans-Siberian stuff. I mean, a lot of those guys started out in Sabotage and they started recording there. But no, Jim and Tom are geniuses. They're freaking sonic geniuses, and they built a studio that just has absolutely. The A room is one of the most pure rooms that I've ever had the pleasure of recording in. And the B room is fantastic too. So I've done records in both. And you know, their sound booths, they just really know how to prepare a room for recording, and they're phenomenal. You know, they are amazing. And they've had really tremendous luck with having really great producers work out of their studio as well. You know, obviously, you know, go back to the legend of Scott Burns doing all of the death metal stuff in there. But yeah, the studio is top notch, man. I had some really excellent memories of recording there, and I would imagine there's a laundry list of musicians that would have the same opinion. So of both the studio and the Morris Brothers, and how pro they are. They're amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've done over 1,000 interviews at this point. I think that's the first time I've been able to really dive in and ask that question about Morris Sound. So I'm glad you confirmed that from a fan's perspective, it's as legendary as what we think it is.
Yes, it is. It's cool, man. And if anybody that goes to Tampa, it's worth the drive by and take the picture in front of the studio. Stuff. So, and they've got a new studio now since they sold the original Morris Sound studio. They have a new studio, which is phenomenal as well. I have not had the pleasure of actually recording in that one. But I still have, done work with Jim since they opened their new studio. So, yeah, they're just phenomenal guys. I can't say enough about how absolutely stellar they are as human beings and also producers.
Now, just talking about New Messiahs again, were there any lyrical themes that you wanted to address specifically this time around? You know,
it usually just kind of comes as it comes out, man. If I have some ideas that I've been working on, the cool thing about having a phone with you all the time, with the memo pad, if a lyrical idea, whatever, or just a song title or, whatever, you can just kind of jot it down and start it. And then, so some of the stuff were just original, some ideas that I had. And then I heard some of Freddie's riffs and things like that. And just said, I think this sounds like a good direction to go with this song or whatever. With me, sometimes there's themes that kind of go through, intermingle between songs, but we don't try to tackle like big concepts or anything like that. We haven't to this point. Usually concept records are really tough, and you can kind of, get in the weeds sometimes when you're trying to make too much of a point on things. It's really tough sometimes to do that. But a lot of times, like I said, there will be themes, here and there, and even themes between records. You could certainly say that, like, like Emperors and Fools, that the concept with from the last record kind of bleeds into this with New Messiahs and, things like that, kind of the overlords kind of, pulling the strings and whatnot. So those themes are there sometimes, but yeah, nothing like that jumps out. And of course, as always, if you follow Ashes, you'll typically see with each record that we've done, there's always usually a vampire tune in there. Well, actually there is on every single record I've done, because I'm a big vampire fan, and I like all genre of vampire stuff. So it'll go from like a Dracula love story to a 30 Days of Night absolute horror fest, so that's just kind of my thing. And so it's not like based on those, it's just sort of based on the concepts of like, what would you, if you were a vampire, what kind of vampire would you be? Would you be the kind that's just like the reluctant vampire, like, shit, man, I got bit, and I'm wandering through life, dealing with this? Or are you yes, I'm a vampire and I'm all into it and I'm just, devouring anything, so it's just kind of the different takes that I like to explore lyrically and things like that. And sometimes the music will kind of get that going or whatever. And then of course I'm a comic book nerd, and so comic characters always end up on our records as well. So you can pretty much always expect that. Maybe sometime I'll leave one or the other off, but that's the kind of stuff that I like, and that inspires me to do what we do. And so I just go, hey man, I got to be a little bit selfish about stuff sometimes, right? It can't always be about everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a good time, man. This record we did a little tribute to Ghost Rider. We got that single out from Hell He Rides, and that was a lot doing that one. That was a suggestion by Freddie, actually, because he's a huge Nicolas Cage fan, and he wanted to do Ghost Rider, and so I'm like, we can do that. Here's some lyrics. Go write the song. So yeah, we had a good time, man. I think musically he really captured the character well, and I hopefully I did as well with the lyrics. So hopefully everybody digs it. I really like the video. I don't know if you've seen it yet or not, but it's
I haven't. Cool. I'm going to check it out now though. Yeah. I really like that about you, Matt, because you strike me as a really serious bloke, as a fan from afar, and listening to you sing, and when you had that enormous long hair that you had, you look like a Viking when you're up there on stage as well. And talking to you, I can see that there's another side of you that has a sense of humor and does dive into things that aren't rooted in reality. And I'll dovetail that point into my question about John. Are you still getting, because that's a very serious topic, as we know, but are you still are you being asked a lot of questions, or are journalists even knowledgeable enough to go there and frame questions the right way about John?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they do. And, I don't have a lot to say. I mean, I'm in communication with John, he's my brother-in-law. I wish him well and everything else. And I see a lot of negative stuff out there, especially when I make comments on, interviews, and then Blabbermouth picks it up and puts one line out from the entire interview about John. And that's fine, man. People are going to have their opinions about what John did, and that's up to them. I choose not to live in a world where there is no redemption, and so I will live in a world that there is redemption, and people can be redeemed for So those other people, I feel bad for them, but it is what it is.
Are you still working in the judiciary or in law enforcement?
Yeah, for 22 years now, man.
Well done. Yeah, it makes it, I've got to be honest with you, it makes it, there's so much I want to talk to you about, and I'm not going to, You know why? Because I'm an adult and I know that I don't want to put you in a position where you even have to answer a question that could potentially jeopardize your standing in that field. But there's so many things that I'd love to talk to you about especially with Kash Patel going on to Joe Rogan's show and talking about the context of January 6th and how that Trump offered the National Guard to the left-wing authoritarians who said no, and they've got that in writing. So it looks like January 6th was, at least to a point, not the actual event, but the compelling events I'm talking about, like the pallets of bricks that we've seen and the like that were left around the Capitol. It's just crazy what's going on. So I will frame my question around this is that, and I do talk about a lot of these things on the show, so this isn't left of center or right turn for me on the show, but do you have a lot of hope, or what type of hope do you have for the future of the United States in context of what the last 10 years has been like?
Yeah, man. I mean, I got to have hope, man. I mean, I think we all have to have hope. I mean, that doesn't mean that we bury our heads in the sand and just ignore, facts, but that's another side of it as well. So I try to, because I've been in law enforcement for 22 years, I try to wait for the facts to present themselves, because that's how you move forward. And if you're trying to, prove a case or prosecute a case, you have to allow the facts to, you follow the facts. And I can only say that I hope that we do better as a people. I hope that we all do better as a people, humanity in general, and just really truly rely on the facts, and people that have done things wrong, they're going to, I can only assume will pay for those things in one way or another, just like everybody does. But I think that there's always, again, room for redemption, whether for whomever it is on whatever side. I think there's certainly room for redemption, so long as you're not taking people's lives or something like that, or seriously taking away their value of life. I think there's always room for that, and I do hope that we kind of get past this very, very divided politic that we're dealing with throughout the world, because I don't think it's just the U.S. I think it's happening in a lot of different places, and I understand that both sides, there are people on both sides that are extreme, and that's a hard thing as well, dealing with that kind of stuff. But I just I don't preach politics. It's a personal thing for me that I don't do, because again, I'm not trying to alienate people that are friends, are fans of music, or just my friends in general, because I have friends that are on all sides of the spectrum where that's concerned, and it's just not my job. And maybe that's part of me being a police officer for 22 years. I can't, I just am not going to put myself in a spot where I'm picking sides, because oftentimes I'm called to, protect people that, are, maybe politically on another side of the table from me. And so I have to be, remain neutral in a lot of things. Yeah. And that's my job. And I feel that way I feel that responsibility a lot with music too, man. I think that's one of the reasons that I don't, in my lyrics or anything like that, if there's anything that's, political or, socially something, I try to leave it as ambiguous as possible, so you can fill in your own blanks. If, a lot of the stuff that I do is like thought out, I can release my rage and my demons in the music and make it aggressive, because I know that that's what a lot of people need to release. That's what I needed. I always needed. That's what drove me to metal, really, is that energy release, and shake your fist in the air and all that. But I'm not going to be a Rage Against the Machine guy. I'm not going to put my politics.
Oh my God, that guy. Yeah.
Or Five Finger or whatever. I don't really follow Five Finger Death Punch, but everybody's like, well, they're conservative, and but I'm just not going to put myself out there like that. I just choose not to. That's not the kind of music that I want to do. And it's not the kind of music that I will do, because I feel that I have a responsibility as an entertainer, because I am an entertainer, and I have the privilege of performing these songs and writing these songs and performing them for people of all types, of all walks of life. I don't discriminate against anybody that's a metal fan, right? People that don't like my music, then that's fine, move along. But I know that I have friends and fans that are of all walks of life, and I wouldn't do anything to jeopardize that relationship that I have with them. So that's kind of where I am with that. That's sort of a roundabout answer. Yes, I hope at some point we all ourselves as human beings, right?
Yeah.
That's about it.
No, you're a good bloke, mate. I appreciate that you're given so much context there that only a buffoon would misunderstand or reinterpret your questions through a filter that would be biased toward one way or another. And I'll simply state that another thing that I appreciate about you is that unlike Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine, who it wasn't only a couple of months ago where he went, anybody can find these articles. I don't need to bloody tell, but just say find the article, because you can easily find it on Google or what have you, ChatGPT. But he was saying that he was, words to the effect, and I'm paraphrasing, effectively non-partisan. Okay, and it was only this week he comes out with standing next to the Mexican flag people in Los Angeles, saying ban ICE and all of this stuff. And I don't think, well, just don't lie. That's my point, Matt, in and amongst it all, is that if you are that way, at least present yourself as that way. Bono's not hiding that he's anything else but a leftist shill these days, and a lot of them aren't, okay? And I don't have a problem with that, to be honest with you, and I don't think any reasonable thinking person does, because we all in the Anglosphere live in what I'd loosely define as, these days anyway, democracies, okay, where we do have freedom of speech, and you're allowed to have these thoughts, therefore these opinions and that voice and that platform to say that. But the issue comes about when you say, I'm nonpartisan, and next minute you're standing there next to the Mexican flag idiots in Los Angeles protesting government orders. And when we say rational government orders, by the way, from an elected official that the vast majority of people in the United States stand behind, clearly, otherwise they wouldn't be there doing it. But that's the issue with musicians, just to dovetail your very well made point.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I don't begrudge people their opinion. I can only say that I wish that more musicians would not try to alienate their fans, and I think that a lot of them do. Whether that's right or left, they end up so far in the weeds where that's concerned, and you could just if you feel like you really needed to get into politics like that, then just, kind of get into politics. And,
exactly. That's the point. Yeah.
And again, man, my opinion is like anybody else's, right? I mean, most of them smell, right? But that's my feeling on it. I prefer to not just piss people off for no apparent reason other than my own personal beliefs. And maybe I have, with even, pointing out Rage Against the Machine, but I mean, it's been pretty clear that they, take a political stance. I mean, it's in the title of their name, right? The name of their band, right? So it's, and I guess the thing is, you just have to determine which machine they're against, which side of the machine they're against. But anyway, hey man, it is what it is. I've got friends, very dear friends of mine that get on social media and they, blast their political stuff, and I love them. I love them to death, but I just don't agree with that particular way of doing things. I think that I've been given a platform, and maybe I'm squandering that, maybe in their opinion, that I have a platform that I can speak and say things like that. But I just choose not to, man. I'm a really a live and let live kind of guy. That's it. And I do pray for humanity and our failings, and we all fail, man. We all have troubles, we all have missteps and things like that, and including, friends or family or just people that we respect, and everybody stumbles. And I just hope that hopefully that we can figure it out. And I think I was talking to on another interview just about how kind of, things are magnified now, obviously with social media and all that. And I think that kind of takes it to another level as well. So it just makes it seem more amplified than ever before.
You're not wrong, mate. Hey, I'll just do a time check. Have we got time for a few more questions, or have you got to head off to another one or other things? There's no dramas either way.
I think you're my last one for the evening, man. So if you got a couple more, that's fine.
Okay, sweet. All right. So I mentioned up top, you've got a broad canon. It's all quality. There are no duds. There's no new metal album, in other words, or some weird alternative thing like so many metalers went through that came out through the 90s. But the album that, from a fan's perspective, might be a highlight, certainly the most critically revered album, I believe, is Something Wicked This Way Comes. But where does that sit in your catalogue? Do you agree that it is probably the most critically revered, and is it one of your favourite albums?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a really good record, man, and I think it's one of those things that it kind of launched. It was, I'll put it in the area. We're getting ready to do a tour, a small tour of Europe, a couple different countries in Europe, and we're going to be Freddie and I are going to be celebrating the Dark Saga and presenting that in its and so that it's coming up on its 30th anniversary here next year, and I've been talking about that a lot and how important that record was, because I think it was a really big turn for Iced Earth, and kind of maybe put Iced Earth on the map a little bit more because of the songwriting and things like that, things that John did to, really make those songs really sing and very catchy and all that. And I think that Something Wicked was just the next evolution. It was almost a combination of stuff that he had done with Night of the Storm Rider or, Burn Offerings, and then mix that with some Dark Saga in there. So it was pretty cool. It was like the first introduction of, the Set Abomine and the Something Wicked trilogy and all that stuff. So that was cool stuff, man. And it's really been pretty iconic for fans of Iced Earth, either original fans of Iced Earth or people that have just discovered the band within the last few years or whatever, and they tend to go towards that record. And again, that was the second record that we had done with Jim Morris at the helm producing, and I think that he tweaked and figured things out more, and we poured a lot into that record. There was a lot of motion, a lot of creativity put into it. That was another one that we banged out the vocals in pretty quick fashion, but everything kind of came together really, really well. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, it's just cool, man. It's another one again that I did it at Morris Sound. I think I did most of my stuff in the B room for that one, and it was just cool, man. It was just a great record, really cool time recording it. I remember we actually had we were already relocated back up in Indiana, and so we came down to Florida to record that record, and so we rented a place, and we were all kind of crashed out in there. And I do remember like coming down because coming down from Indiana to Florida, and I do remember getting some kind of sinus thing because of all the allergens and all that shit that are in Florida that don't exist up in Indiana. And I wasn't used to it, even though I had lived in Florida for 6 years. But just making that trip up there and then coming down, and I got sick about a couple days into it, and then I'm like sitting there, just totally stressing, man. I'm down here. We got this window. We got to get this record done. Cause even though Iced Earth had, bigger budgets than we have, for Ashes of Aries, obviously it was still, we're in the studio, and the time is clicking. And so I do remember just, getting sick and being really bummed out and going, man, this just sucks. But then, I took a couple days off and I was drinking tea and doing all that other stuff while John was doing tracking and things like that. And it worked out, man. Like things clicked back on it. It was just like I was on fire. And so then we knocked it out in a few days. I remember doing a couple songs, several songs like in one day, which is, a lot because you're tracking and you're doing and just the right tone in your voice and just the right delivery of each line and and things like that. It's a lot. It's not like just going in and singing and, hey, knock that song out. That one's a take. You have to. You're doing take after take after take to just find just the right phrasing and things like that. And so it's a lot. And but it worked out really well. And I think it's a brilliant record, man. I still think it's one of the coolest things that I've ever been able to do, and especially doing that entire trilogy live. I've done it a couple times, because that's it was always a fan favorite thing, and it was super, super, super cool. So that's I agree. I think it's definitely on the top there. It's hard to pick your favorite album, man, when you've done so many, and it's like trying to. Who's your favorite kid?
Yeah.
Well,
you read my mind on the next question, which was going to be, well, not so much your favorite, but if you are asked, as I'm about to nominate an album which you think is the best representation of you as an artist, which album would you pick?
Oh man, yeah, I really can't honestly answer that, man, because it's hard, man, because you got more big budget records with Iced Earth, but then I've got my Ashes stuff that is so much me, and just heart and soul and just kind of me all over it, kind of thing. Obviously me and Freddie are the writing partners in Ashes, and we've had a brilliant time doing these records together. So it's tough, man. I can't pick one. The only thing I can say is that probably the most recognition, if I'm doing it from a fan's point of view rather than mine, and I'm taking in the consideration of all the people together, probably the most monumental thing in my career was doing Alive in Athens, simply because it was such a monumental task to do. A couple of shows in a row with so many songs, it was just huge. And we did these two just humongous shows, and we were able to get great takes almost from both nights. It was just a matter of picking, okay, which one is the best take of these, and then some of the nights we only did, single takes or whatever of songs. So then they had to be, but it was just a monumental undertaking. And again, Jim Morris was turning the dials for us on that. He was actually in the recording booth outside the venue, recording everything. And then we got to go home with those recordings and then do the mix down and all that other good stuff. And, still a lot of people touted it's one of the best live heavy metal records. And I can't disagree with them because, I would be lying if I didn't think that it's just a really good sounding record. And it embodied what Iced Earth was live. That's all I can say. So, that's. And I've done other live stuff with Iced Earth, obviously, as well. When I went back with the band in 2008 and all that, but Alive in Athens still just is up there. It's got to be one of the monumental. It's the only gold record that I've got. So that's all. That's that could be part of it.
Amazing, isn't it? Yeah, that's a really good point, Matt, because it did. People have got to remember that was the era of that god awful Metallica symphony thing. that they released when Iced Earth must be given credit for bringing back the true sound of metal to public consciousness again. I understand metal's always been here, and I've been a fan through the 90s, and I dipped out for a lot of years and then have come back in courtesy of all these interviews that I'm doing these days. But I distinctly recall when that album was released and Metal Maniacs writing about it, that grand old magazine that I've had a good chat to Jeff Wagner and stuff, and that magazine really highlighted the album. And when you got the album and you listened to it, it was a smack to the face compared to everything else that was going on out there at the time, and probably right up there with Live After Death, I'd say. And yeah,
it's again that's the one I always put on. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that just fucking amazing. And yeah.
Final question for you, mate. When's the book coming out? God knows you've got a heck of a story to share, so I hope I can read it at some point.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, maybe after I'm done with law enforcement, you know, a couple of years, and you know, maybe do something along those lines. You know, my life, my mixed life. You know, law enforcement, heavy metal. It's, you know, it's crazy to think, man, that I've been doing this for almost 22 years. And in that amount of time, I've done more recordings. I've done more records since I've been in law enforcement than I did before law enforcement. So that's kind of crazy, right? But facts, you know, just the amount of time, because the amount of time that I've been doing this, and I've done 4 Ashes records. I've done an Ice Earth record. I've done a Pyramids, We're Sentinels, and then, you know, multiple guest appearances on stuff. So yeah, so I've been pretty busy in the meantime since I've been a cop. So.
Well, there you have it. Exhibit A for why I enjoyed talking to a luminary from hard rock, heavy metal. Let's just call it subversive rock music styles. That covers just about everything from death metal, black metal, power metal, you name it. Matt Barlow, ladies and gentlemen, what an awesome bloke. And as he discussed throughout the chat, he was experiencing an electrical storm, so that would account for why the lights weren't on if you are watching the video version of the episode. All right, that's it from me. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith. Thanks very much for tuning in. Until the next one, it's a goodbye for now.